America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hi, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Toni Angelini, Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Operations for Job Creators Network.
And you can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from. Today, we are joined by Amy Bos. She's the Director of State and Federal Affairs at NetChoice. Amy works to educate policymakers on key tech issues, including Section 230, content moderation, and antitrust, and advocates for policies that facilitate the continued growth of the free and open internet. Amy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and NetChoice, what you do at NetChoice, and what you're advocating for there.
Absolutely. So I'm the Director of State and Federal Policy at NetChoice. We work to make the internet safe for free expression and free enterprise. We believe that the internet has really thrived. Tech companies have really thrived here in America because we have a light touch approach. You look at countries around the world, European countries, they don't have near the innovation, the successful companies that we have here. And we want to make sure that we keep it that way. We've been incredibly active both at the state and federal level on issues like data privacy, kid safety online, antitrust. It's something that has been, a growing interest among lawmakers. What is possible as far as, additional regulations and what is not possible. So we've been having an active year, and we expect next year to be no different.
Absolutely. I assume with the incoming administration, you have kind of a menu of focus areas that you'd like to see advance. What's your sort of top 5 issues going into this new administration?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, we've seen a number of new regulations under the Biden-Harris administration. I think first and foremost, we need to not hamstring companies and let them grow and be successful. We're optimistic. Trump is a business guy. He understands a lot of how businesses work and how they operate. So I think that's number one. AI, artificial intelligence, is going to be a huge issue coming up. U.S., we want to lead in this area. We have China, we have Russia, we have European countries that aren't too far behind us. And we want to make sure that the U.S. is the global leader in this space too. And then I would just add, privacy continues to be a huge issue. We still do not have a federal comprehensive privacy law. States are trying to step in here where the government is not acting, but we really need the government to step up here. A 50-state patchwork just doesn't work for businesses. And then I would also add for businesses too, we've seen these past 4 years a very aggressive stance from the Biden administration on antitrust, going after companies that are big, successful, and not necessarily focusing on what is best for consumers. We've really seen a weaponization of the agencies to go after politically disfavored companies. Just recently, DOJ is trying to break up Google. FTC wants to break up Amazon. And again, President-elect Trump, we're hopeful there. He said, we have some of the greatest companies in the world here. I think we're going to see some changes and a much more measured approach when it comes to business regulation than what we've seen these past 4 years.
There's so many directions, that we could really take this conversation. It's my head is sort of spinning in trying to narrow it down. I guess the first lowest hanging fruit would be you referenced the patchwork system not working at the state level. What would your ideal federal policy look like to make sure that consumers are being protected, but that the companies are also having the space that they need to grow?
Of course. So consumers have to be in control of their data. They need the option to delete information, to transfer information. They should be in charge of that. And also, this has to go a lot with transparency. What data is being collected? How is it being used? I think there's needs to be much greater focus on that consumer, but then some flexibility with businesses as well, right? So heavy-handed regulations, large companies, let's be honest, can't afford the compliance costs, can afford litigation costs. It's really these smaller companies who just do not have the resources to compete in the way that large companies do. So some flexibility with smaller companies, I think is really, really critical here.
You referenced consumers, which is it's interesting. I wonder how many people are willing to compromise their individual data, some of the most personal things you could possibly have on the internet, for the ease of being able to interact, whether it be social media or purchasing things, or how much of a concern do you hear from average American citizens about the data issues?
Yeah, I think it's changed a little bit in recent years. Think of all those pop-up ads that you get, or accept these cookies. I think for the most part, people are clicking through those, and it's something like that is more of a nuisance than it is beneficial. I think what we are hearing from folks is they just want more transparency in how this data is being used, whether it's with targeted ads or personalized ads, and just what are their options? Can they opt out? Can they opt in? So it is actually, among tech issues, it's really at the forefront of what we're hearing from folks as far as issues that Congress needs to address. We're not hearing so much that, we need to reform Section 230 or reform regulations. It's really, privacy is actually the number one issue that we're hearing from folks in recent polls.
That's good to hear. I think it's also that the ads have gotten so hyper focused in the ability to target. I actually, the other day, just had a conversation with a friend of mine whose son had surgery, and he was very nauseous, the anesthesia. And I said to her on the phone, you should call the doctor and ask for a prescription. And I named the drug, very specific anti-nausea medication that I have not spoken about in years. And within 2 hours, there was an ad on Instagram on my phone for that specific drug. And I think we all just sort of like, oh, whoa, that's crazy. But I mean, they are actually listening in, and we just sort of accept it.
Yeah, I mean, I think a few years ago, 5 years ago, there was a lot of talk about like this creepy factor that, these companies were targeting. I think, there's mixed reaction. I think some people like the personalization of the advertisements. I don't want to get an ad for, toys for a 10-year-old. I think there is some benefit there of having ads that are relevant to you. But again, we need to put consumers in control. Do they want to see these types of ads? Do they want their location to be tracked? I think we need to put consumers back in the driver's seat, give them options on a lot of this information.
Amy, kid safety online has become such a big issue. I mean, we've seen hearings with the heads of Facebook and other companies. Talk to us about some of the kid safety major concerns, as well as some of the proposed solutions and what you're looking at and what you support.
Yeah, absolutely. This definitely is an issue that's gaining a lot of attention. We hear heartbreaking stories from parents, right? And that's It is. It's truly heartbreaking. And we need to look at solutions that really empower parents here. I think our concern with legislation that we're seeing moving both at the state and the federal level is that it increases government at the expense of parents, quite honestly. There's a bill moving through Congress right now. It's called the Kids Online Safety Act. Very well-intentioned bill, has bipartisan co-sponsorship. But what we are concerned with is that, I mean, for one, we truly don't believe this bill does what it says it's going to do. There's a lot of First Amendment problems here. This isn't like going into the store and having to show your ID to purchase alcohol. There are constitutional issues here. There are speech issues that are involved here. We've seen states act on similar legislation that would include age verification, parental consent, and these have been either struck down, they've been halted because they don't pass that constitutional muster. And I think we at NetChoice, we want to work with lawmakers to find a constitutional solution here, one that doesn't grow the government, but that puts parents in charge. Every child is different. Every child is affected differently from social media. At the end of the day, parents know what's best for their child, and we need to make sure that they are in the driver's seat here.
Yeah, actually one of my friends caught her son buying edibles on, I think it was Snapchat. I can't remember which one. But anyway, nonetheless, buying edibles or trying to. And like, how do you stop that? I mean, there's people out there who are, looking to do those kinds of things, and they don't know these kids don't know what they're buying. I mean, it could be laced with something terrible.
Well, I think one issue that is not being discussed near enough is, companies are mandated reporters. They report child sexual abuse material. They report such material to NCMEC, the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. And they're submitting millions of reports a year, and less than 1% of these reports are being investigated. And that's a shocking number. We don't want these reports tossed in a trash bin. We need greater resources for law enforcement, for NCMEC. We need to hold bad actors accountable. And I think that's missing in the conversation. I do also want to say, and it can be argued that companies are too late, that they're not doing enough, but we have seen a huge growth in demand for parental controls. And you have launches of, Instagram teen accounts, for example, as one. We have time limits that we can put on our kids' phones. There's new controls being announced regularly. Again, I think you can argue maybe a little too late, but I think those are crucial to empower parents and to help them monitor their kids' online experience.
Just real quick, Toni, before you come back, the parental controls I love. I mean, you can get them, you can do them on the phone itself. And then also, I know social media companies are starting to do it. But I think that takes, not every parent's involved. And that's the problem is we don't want to see government infringe on and grow and infringe on our parental rights, because there are some parents who aren't involved, and it's unfortunate. I myself was very involved in my kids' social media use as they were growing up, but they had friends whose parents weren't. And so where do you strike the balance so that I don't have the government? I mean, I don't have that issue now. My kids are grown, but so you don't have the government infringing on you, who's an involved parent, and you want to control it, versus the opposite. And that exists, unfortunately.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it does. What I actually hear more often, I don't think it's, an issue of parents don't want to be involved, but they view these controls and they're overwhelmed. They don't even know where to begin to setting some of these up. That's something I've consistently heard. And I think companies need to step up and to educate parents on how this is done. Let's have, companies go into a library and host a parental town hall and walk through some of these, how to set something up. So I think it's much more, not so much that parents don't want to be involved, but they are overwhelmed in this issue. And parents aren't to blame here. Kids are very tech savvy today, right? I think a lot of kids know more about how to use these devices than their parents do. And that's another, that's a tricky subject too. You can look at new regulations, but are kids able to get around them and to, change the settings themselves? That's another issue as well. I think the solutions here, it really boils down to, what does digital education and literacy look like? Maybe this is something that needs to be taught in schools, how to safely navigate the internet, how to identify predators, who to report to, warning signs online. I think that could go a long way into to addressing a lot of parents' concerns here.
Those are great suggestions.
I have my children are also grown now, but my middle daughter, that was my go-to punishment for her because she was the most sort of obsessed with the phone. And when she was in middle school, I would joke that she would have figured out how to hotwire the toaster to get it on the internet. And because I kept taking devices away and she just kept finding a way to get back on. So I sympathize genuinely with parents who are overwhelmed by, the technology. I'm relatively like tech savvy, and she was still finding, workarounds. But I guess what is sort of what do you think the culpability of these big tech companies is for the position that our youth is being placed in right now? How do you balance the responsibility of big tech and their ability to serve people but to also give parents tools to help them protect their children?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. Tech has a role here, and they should be leading. If they want to have a great product, I think for the most part, tech companies don't want to have a site that is filled with, porn, with CSAM. They want a good product. And I think they are hearing from parents on this issue that they need help. So I think that's step one. There's a lot that tech companies can do, but this is part of a larger conversation too, whether it's anxiety or depression and issues that our kids are facing. We've seen the growing numbers too in, the past 4 or 5 years. I think we would be doing a disservice if we put all the blame on tech. There's been a lot going on, whether it's with COVID, whether it's with, school shootings, there's a lot of issues that are happening that certainly can lead to anxiety and mental illness and depression with our youth. So I think we need to have more holistic conversation. If we're just coming in and blaming big tech, I think we're missing the point here. And that's something that we've encouraged lawmakers to look at as well. I also would add, I think we need growing research on this issue as well. There's a little bit of a mixed bag on where on the role of tech and children as well.
I always wonder, about big tech sort of, I mean, who knows what could have been predicted, what they knew when they knew it. But I am sure that no one sitting at any of the big tech companies thought that in 2020 we were suddenly going to send a vast majority of our children, online, 24/7. So to your point, within the past 5 years, I'm sure that, and I don't know this as well as you do, but I can imagine that COVID really accelerated whatever was already happening. What would you say the Federal Trade Commission's role is in the holistic approach to protecting our kids?
Yeah, so I mean, the FTC, it is somewhat limited, right? Congress should be the one in charge of passing new laws. The FTC's role here is really to educate, to interpret the statute as it is. So we've seen them do some work on, enforcing privacy, enforcing kids' privacy. But as far as coming up with new rules, I think we would view that as a little bit of an overreach. And so I think with President-elect Trump and his administration, I think he's looking at a new head of FTC, one that hopefully will stay within the bounds of the law and enforce the law as it is, not what they would like it to be.
Give us some background on the FTC's current approach over the last 4 years under the Biden administration on how it's discouraged entrepreneurship and business growth in the U.S. Versus what you are sort of anticipating from the incoming Trump administration.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, the FTC, they're charged with protecting consumers and ensuring a competitive marketplace. The Biden-Harris experiment, I'll call it an experiment. I think we view that as a complete failure, to be quite honest. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of what competition and who it's supposed to serve, and that is the American people. We've seen a lot coming out of this administration, like I mentioned, going after companies, and not just tech companies, right? They're going after grocery stores, they're going after the handbag industry, they're going after the airline industry, and I think we're seeing an agency that is more beholden to special interests and going after companies that are disfavored than they are about protecting consumers. So we're seeing I like to call it a Europeanization of antitrust. It's really going after companies with additional regulations, and just a complete 180 from where antitrust has traditionally been. The FTC was long a bipartisan independent agency, and it's really been politicized. You've seen Lena Khan, the chair of the FTC. She was campaigning with the likes of Bernie Sanders this summer. So, her allegiances are pretty clear in where she wants to go on this stuff. I think we're very optimistic that under the Trump administration, again, that we'll see a more measured approach. He uses the term fair, and I really like that. He wants to see fair enforcement of antitrust law, and he also wants to make sure that we have the greatest companies, again, in the world. DOJ is going really hard after Google right now. As President Trump has said, China is afraid of Google. And I think that it's, really optimistic that he will not stifle innovation. He wants America to be at the forefront.
The Lena Khan, clearly you don't support her continuing on. Is she in a term, or does the new administration appoint new leadership automatically coming in?
Yes. So we believe that she's headed out the door. She can serve as long as, President Trump would allow. I think every indication is that he will be asking her to leave, or that she will resign, and along with her counterpart at DOJ as well. I think we need a fresh face at the FTC, one that focuses again on that bipartisanship and independency that we have long been accustomed to.
Is there a short list floating around of potential?
I've heard some names, but I think it's interesting. I know his nominations have garnered quite a bit of attention, but not many folks are talking about the FTC. So still TBD on that. He did appoint an antitrust, Gail Slater, to head the antitrust division just recently, but still awaiting word on where he would like to take the FTC.
It will certainly be interesting to see how his sort of vision aligns with yours. And it sounds like, you kind of kicked us off here with something very close to our hearts, which is, making sure that free enterprise is protected in America. And that's obviously one of the things, one of the cornerstones of Trump's agenda. And we can only hope that that sort of bleeds through in all of these areas. Tell us a little bit more about NetChoice, where our audience can learn more about your group, and anything else that you'd like to touch on.
Yeah, absolutely. So folks can go to netchoice.org to learn about our work on privacy, on kids' safety, on antitrust. We have launched a SHIELD campaign, which talks a lot about what parents can do to keep their kids online and additional steps that Congress also needs to take. These are important issues that folks really need to weigh in with their representatives with, whether it's at the state level or federal level as well. Let them know what issues are important to you. We travel across the country and have these conversations with lawmakers, but at the end of the day, they also need to hear what's important for their constituents when it comes to tech policy, when it comes to regulations, the economy. So really encourage folks to reach out, be active in their local and federal government.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for joining us. That's Amy Bos, the Director of State and Federal Affairs at NetChoice. And if you want to have your voice heard or check out the website, you can go to netchoice.org. Thanks so much for joining us and tuning in today at Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. You can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts from. And we'll be back soon with another episode. Bye for now.